All right, you can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Shannon Kendall with American Crafts, and I work here in Utah at the American Crafts home office, home base, as the manager of their in-house project design team. So we get to make fun things with all of these amazing products that American Crafts makes. And today I'm excited to have you in this tie-dye class using these awesome dies that you can get at Michael's. They're the tie DIY kits. I put two on my supply list, but really you could use one or the other for what we're doing today, or both. There's a spectrum of color in each one. It shows right on the front here, everything that you get in the box, the colors that you want. So you could pick and choose one or the other box. I just like having both on hand so I can do ombres and all different things with all of the different types of color. In the kit comes pre-mixed dyes. They look like this. So you don't have to mix anything. They're just already there, super heavy, pigmented. So the days of mixing the powdered dyes are over for us. And these are awesome because you don't get those little flecks of powder that don't completely dissolve. And they're super vibrant. You don't have to use soda ash with these dyes. I find that they work great just how they are. You could use soda ash and experiment with that if that's something you want to try, which is a pre-wash treatment that is used in traditional tie-dyeing. But you don't have to do it with these, and I'm not going to do it on the projects that we're making today. It also comes with a table cover, like a clear plastic drop cloth, bands, and gloves, which you're going to need all of those things to do tie-dye. So all of that is right in these kits. You can, use other bands if you run out, because you'll probably run out of bands before you run out of dye, because this dye goes a really, really long way. You barely need any on each one, which is also super nice because it lasts a long time. So I'm going to set this aside and we're just going to jump right in because I have a lot of stuff to show you today. And I'm excited to show you what things I came up with that you can use tie-dye in your holiday decor and gift giving. So we're going to do some fun things today, but we're going to start with the basics. Okay. So we're going to start with gloves, which I mentioned already. Actually, I don't need these quite yet. I'm going to start with my item that I'm going to dye. Okay. I don't like banding my tie-dye with my gloves on, and I always forget when I'm teaching, but I usually don't band with my gloves on. So first thing I thought of when I thought of holiday tie-dye, what I could do with it, was that we have a tradition in our family to give our kids Christmas Day pajamas. So I don't know if any of you also have that tradition, but it's a fun one. My kids look forward to it. They get to open them on Christmas Eve. Now the grandkids do it too. It's super fun. So I thought, why not make matching tie-dyed pajamas for the whole family? So we're going to start with mom's, right? We'll start with our own. And set this aside. So this was a two-piece white pajama set. It's not 100% cotton, which is also an awesome thing about these tie DIY dyes. They work on synthetic fibers. Traditionally, with the powder dyes, you have to use 100% cotton to get a good dye, but with these, if you do all the steps I'm going to explain to you, they'll work great. And this one is a cotton poly blend, so it's going to work great. Okay, so first thing, with these dyes, because they're so pigmented and they're already pre-mixed, you don't need your surface to be very wet. So I prefer to use just a mister bottle. This is just a regular spray bottle with water in it. And first thing I do is spray this down. Now I do want to mention that I have pre-washed and dried all of the things that I'm working on today. Manufacturers, when they're making cloth items to go into stores, they put a chemical on the fabric to keep it from getting dirty while it's in the store on the shelves. So you have to wash that off before you start adding dye to the fabric, or else that chemical, which is called a sizing, will repel your dyes as you're working. You don't want that. So these have all been washed and dried just normally in my washer and dryer before starting. And I'm just misting front and back, getting all the way down the sleeves. This process I found gets the coverage that I prefer. In my last class that I taught around Halloween, I showed some different examples of going from straight dry, like don't mist it at all, or completely saturated damp and wrung out. And what happens is you get a lot of movement, the wetter it is. So I just like a little bit of moisture so I get some of that nice bleed, but that I don't lose all of my white space. Okay, On this one, I wanted to do a peppermint candy swirl on this shirt. So I'm just going to do the two colors, red and white. So we only need one dye, just the red dye. And I'm going to grab right in the middle of my shirt right here, and I'm just going to start twisting it. Okay, you can see that swirl starting to form. And I'm going to keep my sleeves coming around with everything else. Okay, so now you can see my swirl that I started. So it was that simple. Okay, now I'm going to grab my bands. I just put mine in this little tub, and this is super easy. We're just going to crisscross. This is one of the easiest ways to band a tie-dye, to tie a tie-dye. I'm just going to try to keep my swirls flat while I add these bands. Because I'm not doing lots and lots of little bands, I'm just going to do 4 bands, and I'm going to hold it into this circular shape. So there's 2. So now you can see I'm starting to get these little wedges. I want a few more for this peppermint candy tie-dye. I'm going to add 2 more. So you could stop there if you wanted to, but I liked 4 when I was making my sample for this one. Okay, now you can still see that swirl in there, but I found if I flip it over, I can even see it better. I can kind of pull my fabric down just a little bit. There. So I'm just making sure the front and the back both have somewhat even-ish little wedges that I've created between the bands. Making sure everything stayed in its swirl. Okay, so you can see that right there. Okay, now these bands are going to help us know where we want to put our color. So I'm going to bring in this sheet. I like to use these when I'm tie-dyeing. This is just a baking sheet that came with a drying rack already, the same size as the tray. So I'm just going to put that on there. And what that does is it keeps my item up out of any dye that drips through this cooling rack onto the tray. So now it's time for gloves. So we're ready to jump into dye. I recommend working on your tie-dye in clothes that you don't care about, like paint shirts or wear an apron, because it does tend to splatter a little bit. It's just the nature of it. So you'll want to protect your clothing. Or if you're working with your kids, this is a really fun project to do with kids because it's super easy and it just washes off their skin. But they'll want to be in something that you don't treasure and love for them to wear in the future because they might get dye on it. Okay, so I'm going to just grab my cherry dye and I'm going to give it a little shake. And that's just to encourage any pigment that's settled at the bottom to kind of reincorporate. But I found that I don't really have to shake it too much with these. So these I've already opened. They have a nice little flip cap. But inside, the first time you use yours, you'll want to take the lid all the way off and take the little seals off on the inside. There's a foam one that is up in the lid, and then a metal seal that covers the top of your bottle. You want to take both of those off so that you can squirt your dye out. Okay, so now I'm just going to apply dye in opposing little wedges that we made. Okay, so I'm just going to go straight from the bottle. It's all ready to go. And you'll see how super pigmented that is. Now don't worry too much if it splatters because that's the nature of tie-dye. Okay, and I'm going to go every other wedge. So I'm going to leave some white space in here, which will give us that nice candy swirl. I'm barely putting any on. I also like these trays because I can turn them and then I don't accidentally lift up this and set it down in the dye again. I'm also picking it up by the white space to try to avoid getting dye on my gloves. It's going to get on my gloves, and I'm just trying to be careful about not touching it. That's one of the things you have to learn with tie-dye, not to touch with your dyed hand where you want it to stay white. Okay, I'm going to flip it over, and then we're going to do the same thing in the coordinating spot. So you can see here, I can see which ones had red dye in them already. So I'm just going to add more. Right there, in that wedge. This one. I love how bright this color is. It's so pretty. And this last one right over here. Okay. Now you could put as little or as much dye as you want to on here. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. If you want more white, put less. But again, I found with these, they tend to soak in really nice, so you don't need a ton. All right, and that's as easy as it is. I'm gonna just clean off my glove a little bit. I can use them again. Okay, and now we have our peppermint candy, right? Now it just needs to set for about 30 minutes. So I'm just gonna grab a bag. This is a great way to reuse your Michaels bags. You could use a Ziploc bag, you could use cling wrap, but I'm just gonna set it into my grocery bag. I found this is the easiest way to do it. And just seal it up in there just like that and let it set. So with this dye, the instructions that come in here say that you need to let it set for 6 hours. But I've found, as I've been making lots of tie-dye projects at work, that I only need to let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour. It's plenty of time. So I did one of these before I came into class, which was about 45 minutes ago. We'll open it up and pull it out. So that's been sitting. You can see the dye has moved just a little bit. Okay, now this is the fun part, the reveal. So these are just scissors, regular scissors. Just make sure that you don't snip your shirt or whatever item you've tie-dyed. So just, I lift the band up just a little bit and then give it a snip. Again, this way of banding is super, super easy, because they just come right off. Okay. Now we're going to do the reveal, which is the fun part. Just going to set this down on the floor. Okay, here we go. We'll see if we got our swirl. Yay! Look at that awesome swirl. So we have that peppermint look going on. Isn't that fun? I love opening up tie-dye. It's really fun to see how it turns out. And it's mirrored on the back. So it's gone all the way through. You can see that that didn't set very long, but it really did move the dye in there really, really beautifully. Okay, so now what do I do with this? So now it needs to completely air dry till it's completely dry. And you can, I guess, throw this wet into your dryer, but I don't like to do that personally because I find I have to then wipe out the whole inside of my dryer because the dye transfers off as it's spinning. So what I do is I just hang this up. In the summertime, I hang them up outside on my porch. They dry really quickly. In the winter time, I just laid down a plastic tarp on the edge of my bathtub and hung them up on my bathtub shower curtain rod to let them completely dry. And then once they're completely dry, you're going to throw it into the dryer. So yes, you heard that right. The dry shirt is going into the dryer, and you're going to heat set this dye. It is super important with this dye that you heat set it. So everything has to be dried in the dryer for 25 minutes on medium to high heat. And sometimes I do it twice, just if I have time, just to make sure that that is nice and set. And then after that, I just wash and dry it like normal, and it's ready to wear. And I want to also do the pants to this one. So I'm going to hang this one up over here for a second. Okay. Since I touched that red, I'm going to make sure my gloves are clean. I tend to like to keep a little damp towel next to me that is like one that I don't care about or is a dark color to just clean up any dye messes. Okay, so the pants. So the pants for this set were just these cute white joggers that came together with the shirt. Okay, so that's what they looked like. And I've prepped these ahead of time a little bit to speed this up, but I wanted to show you how I did it. So the top half of these I want to keep white. So I've bundled them all up and put them inside of this Ziploc bag, pushed it all the way to one corner and just sealed it up. And I've found that that helps me to keep this really clean. Again, it's messy, it's gonna splatter, things are gonna splash, I'm gonna get dye on my hands, so that's a way to protect the part that I want to keep white. And I'm just gonna do some green candy cane stripes on the bottom of these pants. So I've already done this side, but I want to show you how I did it. So I just laid it flat, and then this is going to create how you do stripes in tie-dye. You just do a fan fold. Remember back to elementary school? So I'm doing this fan fold. Okay. So now I've got it folded just like that. And now I'm going to band just the same as I did on this one. I like to get my bands pretty tight. And I'm just going to lay it right next to the other one so my stripes line up when I'm wearing these pajamas. Okay, 2 more. So if you're working with kids, mom, you might need to help, or grandma, you might need to help, dad, with the banding part, and then let the kids have fun with the dye. Last one. Now, if I wanted these pants completely striped, I could have just kept going all the way up the top. Since I'm only doing the bottom, I'm just going to do 4 bands. You can see why I generally don't band with my gloves on. They just kind of get in the way. Okay, so now I'm ready to dye these. Okay, so I'm just going to set them on my tray again, and I'm going to use green this time. I'm doing really traditional holiday colors for these pajamas. Gave it a little shake. Okay, now I'm just going to apply it right onto here, and I'm going to try to leave some white on either side of my band a little bit, just to help it. So the band will keep it white in there, but just to help the dye, this dye is super pigmented, likes to move. So I'm going to just try to keep it a little bit away from the bands, just to add a little extra white. And I'm just gonna kind of flip them over and turn them. Another tip I have is once I've touched it with my left hand, I try not to touch anything white with this hand again, because now I have green dye on it. So I designate my clean glove and my dyed glove. Okay, now I'm going to come into the middle here. Do the same thing. Just a little bit of green all the way around in there. And on the other leg. Okay, just sprinkling it on. Doesn't take very much. Okay, last little part. You know what? I'm going to do one more little bit of green right up here at the top, so it just bleeds out at the top. Now you can see it's good that I had my top white part bagged there because I splattered a little bit, but that's all protected inside my Ziploc bag. Okay, and that's all there is to it. Now that would be bagged up just like I did the other one in reusing a grocery bag or a Michaels bag, and let it set for about 30 minutes. Okay, so now I want to show you how they turned out and how the rest of the ones for the kids turned out using the same techniques. Okay, so here's our mama ones. I'm gonna make sure I don't have any dye on here. Okay, so here's the mama shirt. So look how vibrant that still is, even though it's been washed and dried and it's completely fun. Here's the pants. So they have those stripes on the bottom. I think that will look so cute together, worn like that with the green on the bottom, the red on the top. Okay, so there's mama's pajamas. Then we have dad's. My husband just likes wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, so I just did pajama pants. This one I did by just drawing up little pieces and banding it like that. And then what I did is just put one color on each little bubble that I made. And that's how I got that color. Okay, and then for kiddos. Okay, so for these, I use some of the same techniques as on mom and dad's. So here's one pair. So these were just the stripes where I fan folded it like that. And then I just did the 3 colors, the 2 shades of green and a red. And then on the top, I did the fan fold as well, but I did it around the neck like this. And I just took my sleeves and folded them like that. And then I banded here and here and then did the 3 colors again. And then that's how you get that half circle. Then for the second kiddo, I did the same thing as on dad's where I did a bullseye like this, but I kept going and did more bands until I came up to like this. And then I did the 3 colors and I included this sleeve into there too. So you can see how the sleeve was banded in. And now I have a half bullseye, and then I just did that again on the pants. So these are really fun Christmas morning pajamas. I think that my grandkids and my daughter and her husband would love those. So, okay, so then I started thinking, what else can I use my tie-dye for the holidays? And I had these pieces of fabric. So these are just big pieces of cotton that I got at Michael's. They're back by the yarn at my Michael's, and they're just wrapped around in a length of cotton fabric. And so I had these, and in the past I had some other projects. So this is just the cotton, and I was experimenting with the color, and so I had made these pieces of fabric with tie-dye. This one was a pillowcase I was experimenting on with some different tying techniques. And I thought maybe I could just use these to make some little ornaments. This one's a rainbow. So I thought this would be a fun way to make ornaments. So I just dyed these the same way that I did the other ones by pulling it up, adding the dye. This one I just did the 2 colors. The red was the stripe. You can see the stripe. So I fan folded this whole thing this way. Okay, and then where it's white was where my bands were. So I just cut some little pieces of those and put them in embroidery hoops. But I thought, I wonder if this dye will work on wood as a wood stain. And guess what? It does. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I had these little embroidery hoops that I wanted to put my fabric, my tie-dyed fabric in, and I thought I wanted to add some little beads. So these are just little wooden beads, and I'm just adding them onto a wooden skewer just for ease in painting. And this dye works really good on wood. You'll see the color. So this is just a little Tupperware dish I recycled from our lunch meat. I like to recycle all my recyclables into crafting tools. And I'm just going to put those on there. Okay, I'm going to grab some gloves again. Find my thumb. Okay, and I'm just going to take this dye and put a little bit of it into the cap. I'm going to use the cap as my cup. Just a tiny bit. And I'm going to do a little bit of the red too. This is messy business. I always get dye all over everything, but it's fun. That's why I cover my surface. Okay, then I have my paintbrush. It's just a regular paintbrush. And I'm just going to dip it into the dye in the cap and just paint it onto here. And I put these beads on the skewer so that when they're drying, they dry evenly. Look at that. Ah, it's so pretty. I love it because I can still see the grain of the wood. I don't know if that will translate onto camera, but I can still see the grain of the wood through there. It really is like a stain. So it's not as deep of coverage as you would get with a paint if you were to paint these beads. But I like putting my beads on the skewer because then they don't run away from me or fall on the floor when I'm in the middle of painting them. And I put them over the Tupperware tray to hold the skewer straight and also to catch any drips. Okay. So just kind of dabbing that on. It's barely taking any, you guys. It's super, super pigmented. It's so nice. I'll grab another one. Do some green ones. Oh, look at that color. Wipe off my glove because I was holding the red bead. Now I have a tie-dyed bead. It's got red and green. That'd be fun too. You could try different colors together on these beads if you wanted to. Okay, I'll do a second green one. See how easy that is? Another use for the dye. Don't have to buy anything extra. You got it right there. Do the whole project. Okay, and it works the same way on my hoops. So I'll show you one of my hoops. So I just took my hoop and dipped my brush in it and just rubbed the dye on. Because it's so fluid, the wood just soaks it up just like a stain. But I don't have to wipe it off. I'm just going to let it dry. So like with stains, you have to go back and kind of wipe off the oily excess. This isn't oily at all. It's just so nice. And it's that deep, rich color. Okay, so that's what I did. And then I painted my other hoop red, and I just let them sit until they were completely dry. Okay, and then I want to show you how the finished ones turned out. I'm going to use these again in a minute. So I'm going to set those aside. I just set them in like that and let them dry. Okay, so here's my dried beads. Look how pretty those are. They're so bright. They turned out so good. And then I went ahead and I put some of those scraps of fabric into my dyed hoops. So there's the red dyed hoop. And there's the green one. And then I just did a little bit of embroidery, tied a little piece of yarn on the top, and hung a bead. So you can kind of see what those look like. How fun, right? So easy. And these would look so cute hung on a wall or just hung on my Christmas tree. I just like the little splash of color. I like colorful Christmas trees, so I like the splash of color that tie-dye can bring. And then I also did some, because why not, right? You don't have to stay with just red and green for Christmas. If you want to go rainbow everything, right? So here's rainbow ones that I did. I didn't stitch on these yet, but I used my same, I'd already dyed my hoops red and green, and then I thought, I'm going to do some rainbow ones. So I picked up some of the red and some of the blue, and I could go ahead and stitch on those if I wanted to. And I also thought, well, I have all my rainbow colors going on. I had these white stockings laying around, and I just went ahead and tie-dyed my stockings rainbow. These are so bright. These have been washed and dried, and I did them just the same way. So this one I did in stripes by folding it this way and adding the rainbow color, and this one I did a swirl. I let it sit longer than an hour, so you can see I lost a lot of my white, but you can kind of see the swirl happening on this one. So fun, right? Okay, and then I thought, if I could paint on wood, what else could I paint this dye on? So I decided that I would make my own gift wrap, which is really fun for the kids to do. So this is just a roll of white gift wrap that I got at Michael's. I'm just going to open it up on my surface. I'm going to use these same little cups. And you can see that I barely used any dye to do those beads. So you could just do whatever you wanted to, freehand. And it works great as a paint. Okay. You could let the kids do this. You could splatter it on there. You could blow it with a straw so it really looks like tie-dye. Go in and add some green. You can see how far this dye goes. This takes a tiny bit. Do whatever pattern you like. This would be really fun. I think my kids would really like to do this. Customize their own gift wrap. You could do little dashes. Right? Then just set it aside and let it dry. And you have this when it's all dry. So these are a couple that I did that are similar to what I just showed you. Super easy, super fun, looks so cute on boxes. So here's a box that I wrapped. And I thought to myself, okay, now this needs a bow. So how could I do a tie-dye bow? So I thought pom-poms, and I wonder if I could tie-dye yarn. So like I said at the beginning, it's so awesome that this dye will work on synthetic fibers, because a lot of times, I don't know if any of you are crocheters or work with yarn, but if you wanted to do your own hand-dyed yarn, you'd always have to use a wool blend or a wool yarn or 100% cotton yarn. And this works on synthetics. So I thought, I'm going to try this. So I'm going to show you how I did it, because it turned out really awesome. Okay, I'm just going to use my rack that I had on one of my sheets and show you how I first set up my bundle. Okay, so at home, I used the back of a chair. I don't know if this is going to translate very well, but I just want to take this out of the skein and get it into a long bundle that I can tie for my dye. So I just took it at home. I used a chair, and I also did a bigger one on when I did a whole entire skein. I did it around this little art easel that my kids have with the chalkboard on one side and whiteboard on the other, and I just wrapped it around the top. So I just went around and around and around and around, right? Okay. Just hard to show on my rack, but I didn't really have anything else that would work to show you. So then when you're done, you have this bundle. This white yarn is going to be hard to see as well. So I'm just going to show you what my bundle looked like, okay? You have this bundle of yarn you've made, and then I did follow the step that natural yarn dyers do, where they soaked their yarn bundle in a little bit of vinegar and water just to cover it, just to get it super saturated, because I wanted to make sure my color went really well all through these fibers of the twisted yarn. So this is just regular, affordable, big giant skein of yarn that I've wrapped, and I'll show you what it looks like as soon as I wring it out. So when you take it out of your vinegar water, just wring it out really, really well. And you can reuse that water and soak another bundle if you want to. It's just cool water. Okay, and now you can see how my bundle looks. Okay, so I just wrapped it around, all around my easel. And then I tied it with just little pieces of yarn every so often to keep it together. Okay, so it's all together like that. All right, now I need another tray. And it's ready for dye.
Hey, Shannon, we have a question.
Sure.
Jeannie asked, would you be able to tie-dye tissue paper, or would that run too much?
I think it would absorb it actually a little bit. That paper that I was using had a slight gloss on it, like some gift wraps do, and it dried perfectly on there. So I would say try it, because I think it would work. You'd have to be really careful with it. With that wet tissue being damp, it's going to be very delicate. So just be careful handling it. But I think it would work. Okay, I'm gonna need my dyes back, so I'm gonna pour my extra. Even though I put a tiny, tiny bit in there, I still had some left. Goes a long way. Okay, and I'm going to do back to traditional colors this time, but I'm going to add in a lighter shade of red and a lighter shade of green to my yarn to kind of get an ombre color thing going on. Okay, so this is just soaked yarn that's been bundled in little bits. You could divide it as many places as you want to help you organize your color, or just go for it like I'm going to. Okay, so this is Blossom. It's kind of a pink. And I'm just going to put it right on my yarn. Now, if I wanted really speckled yarn, I would just leave it like that. But if I want it really saturated, I'm going to take my gloved hands and just kind of work it into that wet yarn. You can see why I like these trays. It catches all my drips. Okay. And since that's wet, it's going to absorb that really nicely. And the vinegar just helps open up the fibers a little bit to accept the yarn, the dye into the yarn. Okay, now I'm going to do red. Do it over here on this side. This is cherry, the color cherry. Do a little bundle. Since it's the same tone as that one, I'm not worrying about washing my gloves between, because if I get a little pink in my red, that's not going to change much. Okay, and I'm leaving sections of white in between. Okay, now I am going to wipe off my gloves. So I'm moving to green. Okay, now we'll start with the light green. This is key lime. Leave a section of white. Blend that all in. I didn't get all the red off my gloves, but I just add a little more dye and it covers it up. Okay, there's that one. And then we'll go back to our true green, grass green. Right here on this end. I like leaving a little bit of white in there for interest, but you could do the colors right up next to each other if you wanted to. But I just thought when I rewind it to make my pom-pom, it'd be nice to have some white spots. Okay, so now we'll just follow the same rule to heat set this. So I didn't put this one in a bag. I just left it on this tray because the yarn takes quite a while to dry. I dried it overnight and it was still wet in the morning. And so I just took a fan and aimed a fan at it and let it completely dry. And once it was completely dry, I took this whole bundle. This is why having these ties are really nice. I took the whole bundle, threw it in my dryer, and did the same heat setting process. So I dried it on medium to high heat for 25 to 30 minutes until the dye was set. And then I have this little baby washing machine underneath my washer and dryer. So I just threw it in there and did a little tiny load of just with regular detergent and washed and dried it again. But you could wash and dry it in your sink if you don't want to do a whole load just for one skein of yarn. So you could wash it in your sink with a little bit of baby shampoo or a little bit of dish soap, and that works just the same too. Then just throw it back in the dryer and let it dry again one more time. Okay, and so then what we have when we're done is this beautiful dyed bundle. So that has been heat set, air dried, heat set, and then washed and dried in my washing machine. And you can see these ties kept it nice and untangled, right? So then I would just snip those off and wind it into a ball. I like how the color turned out on this one. This first one I did was a different yarn and it turned out a little more pink. And then this is a thick yarn that I did and it was a little more pink too. So you guys are reaping the benefits of me doing trial and error. With these, I didn't let them dry completely before I tried to rinse them. And so they're a little bit more faded. But you can see that when I heat set it, it worked really great. Okay, then you just take your skein, clip those little pieces, wind it back up into a ball, and you're ready to make a pom-pom. Okay, so I love these little pom-pom makers. It's on the supply list for the class. And I'm gonna just show you real quick how to do a pom-pom. So we'll do two sizes. Well, maybe we'll just do one big one. Those are the fun ones on packaging. Okay, find the end of my yarn. So this is my hand-dyed yarn. And you just wrap it around, open up the side. So this just opened up and then you just wrap it around. And I've made a gazillion pom-poms in my life, so I'm pretty fast at winding it, but you don't have to go fast. You can go however you feel comfortable. And you just, I like really full pom-poms, so I just do it really tight and really full. You can see all that color variation in our yarn that we got. Keep on going.
Hey, Shannon.
Yes.
So we've had a couple people ask where you got the white PJs.
I just found those on Amazon, actually. I just looked white pajama sets and they came right up. You could always use t-shirts too as the tops if you just wanted to try to find pajama bottoms somewhere else. Michaels has awesome, really soft white t-shirts that work great for dyeing. Okay, we have one side about done. Like I said, I like it really full, so I push it to the limit. I wind it as far as I possibly can. Okay, then you just shut that side, trim your yarn, and then you do the same thing on the other side. I gotta wind this again, Stacy. Are there any more questions that I can answer while I'm winding?
Dee asked, would you be able to dye on a lightly colored yarn?
Yes, yes, these dyes work great. I've dyed on the dad's pajamas that I dyed were actually a really light gray because I couldn't find white ones, and they worked great. I've dyed on white t-shirts and gray t-shirts and light pink t-shirts. So I'm assuming that would work very similarly on yarn. Then you have that extra added little color too. if you leave some of the natural color showing through.
And Regina asked, so if she wants to dye a white scarf, what fabric should she use or avoid?
With this dye, you can use anything you want. I have done it on rayon, I've done it on silk, cotton, poly cotton blends, 100% polyester, and it has worked on every single thing, as long as you can heat set it. So if it's something that you can't put in your dryer to heat set, then I would avoid that, because that step is super important with these dyes. In traditional old school tie dyeing, when you would use the powder dyes, you would rinse them actually out after they'd set. You would rinse them before you heat set them. And with these, you cannot do that, or the dye will just all run right out down your sink. So you want to make sure you heat set them, air dry them completely, then heat set them in your dryer before getting them wet again. And as long as you do that, they work on every kind of fabric. So just make sure that whatever you're doing it on can go in your dryer, at least on a medium heat, for 25 minutes. Okay, so now we have our wrapped little pom-pom. And there's this little notch right here. And you just stick your scissors in there and trim. These are not my favorite scissors for this. I forgot to bring my favorite pom-pom scissors. These are my tie-dye scissors. My favorite pom-pom scissors are the kind that just have the grip that you don't put your thumbs and fingers into any holes. You just hold the grip and trim. They work the best on pom-poms because it's pretty thick layers you're cutting through, so your hand doesn't get as tired if you use that other kind. Okay, so now I'm leaving my pom-pom maker shut. I just cut another length of my yarn, and I'm just gonna wrap it around. You'll see the gap that I just put my scissors through. I'm gonna wrap this into that and pull it pretty tight. And then I'm just gonna tie a square knot. I like mine tight because I don't like any little fluffs to come out of my pom-poms. Okay, square knot. Okay, now I'm gonna open up the sides again. And then I'm gonna just hold both sides of the white piece right here. It might be a different color on your pom-pom maker, and pull them apart. So they're meant to come apart like that. And then we're done with the pom-pom maker. You can see we have a very furry pom-pom. So now this guy needs a haircut. So I'm gonna grab my bigger scissors since I don't have my other ones. And then you just trim them down. Okay, and this takes a little bit of time, but it's very rewarding because you get this pretty shaped pom-pom. So don't leave your pom-poms hairy. Give them a little haircut and they look so much nicer. So just kind of look at it, trim it, fluff it again, look for any little stray pieces that are hanging out. Okay, and don't be afraid to cut them pretty short. You could keep going and cut them pretty short. So that's why I always like making the big ones, because then it gives me more room to trim down if I want a really tightly packed pom-pom. But look how pretty that turned out with our hand-dyed yarn. Isn't that fun? So now we have a bow for the top of our package. So let me grab my package. Okay, and I'm just gonna take some more of my yarn, cut a length of it. And you could use this yarn on anything, not just gift wrapping or pom-poms. You could use it for crocheting something beautiful. Then I'm just gonna wrap this around my package. I think I'm gonna wrap the tie-dyed pajamas this way with my tie-dyed gift wrap and my tie-dyed yarn. Okay, and just tie it off. And then I'm gonna use these little strings that I left on my pom-pom to tie my pom-pom to my package. So I'm just gonna slip them underneath that band I just made and tie another knot. These pom-poms would also be super fun as tree ornaments. I love putting pom-poms on my tree. So this would be a fun way to do it. And if you don't want to do variated colors like this with all the pinks and reds, you could stay more traditional, or you could go full on rainbow, or you could do a single color if you wanted to and just leave a lot of white in there and get lots of red and green. So that guy could have been used to be trimmed a little bit more, but for sake of time, I'm not going to, and I wanted to show you a couple of other ones. So this one was also the thicker yarn. that I did the pom-pom out of. They just look so cute and happy. And then I also did a rainbow skein. So instead of just doing red and green on my dyeing, I use all the colors of the rainbow. I don't know if you can see that very well on my yarn ball, but I did like a rainbow colored one. And this is how that pom-pom turned out. So it has the yellow and orange and purple in there as well. And I used that one to do a sparkly gift. So this one is the box. This box had a lid, so I just wrapped the lid in paper from Michaels. And then I used my rainbow pom-poms, and that's the middle-sized pom-pom, this little one. And I did 2 on that one to make it cute. So, you know, you're not only set to use just pom-poms on gifts, because here's a stocking, another one of those white stockings, and I just hung pom-poms from the side. And those are also the rainbow ones. So they're really fun. Is there any more questions, Stacy?
Yes, let me see here. Linda B asked if you could do can the heat setting be done in an oven or a microwave?
I didn't find as much success with the microwave on the yarn, because that's how you would do a traditional wool yarn. You can heat set it in the microwave. But when I did it with these synthetic yarns, I'll show you what happened. So it actually affected the texture of my yarn. So this color is still really, really pretty. Let me get a close up on the yarn. But I don't know if you can see the difference. See how this one is nice and fluffy still by heat setting it in my dryer? This one I did in the microwave, and it actually kind of melted the synthetic fibers a little bit, so it feels a little bit crunchier. It's not as soft and fluffy as the one that I did in my dryer. So you can, but it did affect the texture of my yarn. I mean, it didn't burn or, you know, burn in my house or make it smell bad or anything like that, but it did kind of melt those polyester fibers in there. So I found that these, doing it in my dryer, I kept that softness of the yarn that I wanted. So I'll probably still use these for something, probably not something crocheted that I would wear because it is kind of scratchy. I actually do think it kind of melted the fibers, the synthetic fibers in there in the microwave. It just got too hot wrapped in saran wrap like that. But in my dryer, in that bundle, it didn't get tangled. As you can see, this one just came out perfectly. So I found that my dryer is my favorite way to do it. And just turn on a movie and make a yarn ball. Watch a Christmas movie. It's fun. That's it. I had my kids winding all of these balls for me a couple nights ago, and they just turned on Christmas movies and wound yarn. So, is there anything else?
Let me see here. Everybody's loving the class. Regina says she's going to have a tie-dye Christmas.
Good.
Patty,
so am I.
Patty asked, she said she's had trouble dyeing acrylic in the past. Will this dye be vibrant?
Yes, you can see that it kind of did fade a little on this one compared, but this one I had a lot of success with. So this one I put a little bit more dye on it than I did this one. So this one stayed nice and vibrant. I need to make a yarn ball out of this one and then try some pom-poms out of this one. So with this one, I just saturated it a little bit more and I rubbed it in with my fingers a little bit more, and I put a little more dye on it, which I think on the synthetic yarn, it needs it a little bit. And then I just let it dry completely. And I got brighter color there than I did there. But on this rainbow one, I got pretty bright color. When it's all wound up, it's kind of hard to see. But my yellow is really true to yellow right there. You can see that little bit of yellow. So I got some nice color on this rainbow one. And I did leave a little bit of white in between each color so that I wouldn't get mud, because I wanted it to stay nice and pretty. So I think just kind of experiment a little bit, but learn from my mistakes. So I would say yes to soaking it in the vinegar water, wringing it dry, bundling it, and then saturating it pretty good with the dye, rubbing it in with my glove, and then let it completely air dry, then heat set, and then and then you can wash it and dry it again, and it's good to go. This has been washed and dried a second time. So I did the heat set, then I washed it and then dried it again, and it still retained that much color. So I think that it's pretty exciting because I've tried dyeing other yarns in the past and it just hasn't worked at all. And these pigmented dyes really work great on the synthetic as long as you do that heat set. So have fun with this, you guys. There's so many things you can try. Experiment. Like I wouldn't have thought of doing tie-dyed gift wrap until I just started painting it on stuff. So try it on other things. It works really great on wood. You could try wood-shaped ornaments. You could try doing it on there in a pattern that mimics the tie-dye look of where those bursts are coming out. Make gifts for your friends. Make some home decor. It's so fun, and I highly recommend it. It's a great thing to do with your family because it's super kid-friendly too. Have fun with it, you guys.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Shannon. Everyone loved the class. People say, Regina says that Shannon rocks and that they love this class.
Thank you, Regina.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. And thanks, Shannon, for showing us all those cool things with tie-dye. If you want to take another class, you can always go to michaels.com/classes. We have tons up there. We'll have more with Shannon. I'm sure you'll see those pop up. Otherwise, everyone have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.